All right, guys. So this is XB Walker, or Brandon, as I'm also known, and I am here interviewing George. George, I believe we pronounce your last name Creasy, but I may be wrong.
Correct.
Oh, first
Very good.
try. First try.
First try,
All
always the best one.
right. Yes. So
Never false starts.
we are here interviewing George, and I'm just going to go down a list of questions. I'm really thankful, George, for you taking your time to interview with me today. I know that I'm not quite at 100 million followers, but I'm really close. I'm just off by about 999 million followers.
Hey,
Okay. Uh,
getting right there.
yeah, I'm almost there. Just a couple more. Just a couple
Uh
more. So before we dive into War of Rights, I'm gonna ask you just some kind of interesting warm up questions because I know that you only play War of Rights. That's all you ever do, and you
Ever.
literally don't leave that chair right there, and all you ever do is play War of Rights. But I just want to
Exclusively.
exclusively. I just want to ask you
Yeah, no,
some.
there's some super glue here that otherwise I would be, you know,
Yeah,
it's
isn't it in your contract that you're not allowed to leave that computer chair for your entire career? You have to play War of Rights
mhm.
only. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's made for some fun uh things I've had to do. The things I've done
Nice.
is
I don't want to know the things you've had to do if you're stuck on that chair. All right. So question number one. So what first PC game really drew you in? Not necessarily the first game you ever played, but the very first game that really hooked you.
Let's see. Some of the first ones that hooked me as a wee kiddo included something along the lines of Sid Meier's Civ 3
Mm,
was very big for me, and also especially Age of Empires 2, Age of Kings was
a great game.
huge on my list. And both of those also, I would probably argue, really helped establish an early love for history, albeit uh, for me, it started out as, when I was a really wee youngin', just somebody that was interested in dinosaurs and old steam trains and things like that. And over time, it progressed. When I would play with my Legos, I would actually research medieval architecture, defensive architecture, to ensure I was doing it right,
Yeah,
because I was that kind of kid. Uh,
that's the best kind of
and
kid.
absolutely, and I would. Uh, by the time I was 13, started getting into all sorts of interests with girls, and
Oh,
and
really?
also
That's around
I
the right age, I think.
well, but of perhaps more interest here is getting interested in Edwardian and Victorian uniforms and clothing, and uh, kind of that era of steam power, and it was just incredibly interesting for me, and from there developed as we continued. But um, certainly as Age of Empires and Civ 3 certainly kept my interest well rounded. Stronghold was another awesome, at
Yeah,
least one
that's
game.
one I grew up on for sure. That was a great game.
Oh, yeah. Two
Yeah.
and three kind of just sputtered and declined
Yeah,
into the
that
ground
happens.
and then a little bit farther. But beyond that, awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I was AOE 1 and 2 as well. Love those games. I grew
Nice.
up on consoles originally. PC didn't really kick off for me till I was in my early teens, and then it was no looking
Okay.
back. But I was like Super Mario, Excite Bike. I was all about Excite
Yeah.
Bike. Loved that game. I'm right with you. All right, so like I said, you only play War of Rights now because that's all that matters to you. But theoretically, what other games do you enjoy playing these days?
Well, theoretically speaking, some of the other games that are out there are certainly very awesome. Include something similar towards a later era of Verdun is an awesome one, as is um, very recently I started getting into Hell Let Loose. I picked that up during a sale, and it's been super awesome. Very few times I've had the chance to play it. Um, Beyond that, I'm also very much into something like Europa Universalis 4,
Yes.
or to go the long route on that one,
Mm-hmm.
or pretty much anything of a strategy genre, Hoi 4, um, various Paradox games, or Sins of a Solar Empire. So strategy, city management, all sorts of different games like that are very much in my wheelhouse.
Yes, I think Paradox Games has made many a gamer a overnight geology expert or
Right?
geography expert, rather
There
geology.
you go.
And I'm one of them. You know, my wife will be like, "How do you know all these countries and all these states?" Well, I'm just a smart guy. I don't know. I just
What can
know.
I say, honey?
Yeah, certainly not that I play games all the time in those countries, but yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm with you right there. Those are all great games. Verdun, I know, is kind of a similar feel to War of Rights in that it's the more historical setting. They didn't go for hyper arcade style. They went for the more realism approach, which I can
And
certainly
they say
appreciate.
gaming doesn't do anything for you.
Yeah, right, right. Okay, so moving a little bit ahead, what would you say is the first thing? Because you talked about it a little bit earlier. What was the first thing that really brought you into loving the Civil War era in particular?
In regards to video games, I was very much astounded and loved the yet again lovely Sid Meier's his Antietam and Gettysburg.
Oh yes.
Um, and then much later on, I was uh, very much into Ultimate General. They did an awesome series with that, or Ultimate General Gettysburg, and then the full-on Ultimate General they did right after.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about that same time I was playing Ultimate General Gettysburg that I was tootling around online looking for other games about the American Civil War, and there was very small amount. Uh, and
Very.
I happened across this mod or a ModDB page about uh, some games, and I went, "Wow, these look really cool. I like the concept that they're going for eventually." Few problems there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I ended up emailing to continue on to my origin to joining Campfire Games. I ended up emailing them and saying, "Hey, I really like what you have going on here, and I noticed a few issues with your character models. So I have some experience. I might be able to help." And I offered a list of some of the details that I had noticed were off, and said, "Hey, if you're looking for somebody, eh, I can be your man. Maybe
And
I got
then
the free time."
one
And then
day
I don't.
you're part of it. That's pretty neat. Well, that was actually going to be my next question. How did you find your way to Campfire Games? But you answered it, so we could just skip
I'm
right.
right on there for
Yeah,
you.
you're on top of it, man.
Yeah.
We could skip right ahead to the next one. So
Okay, we'll see you. Have a great day. Oh, sorry.
so
Nope,
I
that's a typical event. Sorry.
yeah, nope, nope. Don't forget the glue. If you try to get up, you're gonna hurt
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. No,
So
I've already ripped the pants like 5 times. It's fine.
so I assume you visited a lot of battlefields, particularly those pertaining to this game. So out of all the battlefields you visited, and not necessarily just the ones that are related to this game, at least in its current stage, but out of all the ones you
Yeah.
visited related to the Civil War, which would you say it was your favorite one to visit, and maybe why?
Yeah, that's a really tough question because I really enjoyed all of the different battlefields that I've had the lovely opportunity to go to, both in regards to the trip that we did back in 2014, let alone other opportunities I've had, especially considering I'm over here on the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
So
I know the
bit of a
feeling.
problem too. Yeah, yeah, you're very much well aware. So it's usually a bit of a problem for me to try and get over there to the East Coast side, short of a small time that I was living over in Philadelphia, going to Temple University. So now I'm over here in Southern Oregon, going to university local here, and uh, wishing that I could have those opportunities again sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But um, to answer your question, I greatly enjoyed, obviously, the battles of the Maryland campaign. The battlefields at each of them have been very well maintained and even improved on by the National Park Service with the ways that, as of late, they've been trying to restore the battlefields to their battlefield period conditions in regards to like the planting of trees in
The
particular
historical
locations, or
places.
um, the efforts to restore some of the buildings or even build new ones to the period that they're have been doing some awesome research on. So I cannot commend them enough on their efforts there. Um, I do wish that the Battle of South Mountain could have some of those efforts as some of the big ones like Antietam and Gettysburg have been able to had on them. That being said, South Mountain, right in the midst of residential and farming communities, so that
Yeah.
doesn't help. Not to mention all those big ass cliffs. So,
Yeah.
also bit of a problematic thing there. But um, let's see, another one that I actually greatly enjoyed, not so much a battlefield, but some of the arsenals, such as the one at Richmond, when they have that museum there at the old Arsenal buildings in Richmond when we had the chance to visit there. That was a really neat one, especially still with all the some of the moving waterworks and all that. That was a
Hmm.
little bit fun to see, albeit obviously not powering anything. But yeah, just so many great battle sites and a lot of work that's being done to make sure that they're preserved and even improved upon, as I mentioned, for future generations. And well, with any luck, War of Rights can also take a hand in helping that, at least for newer generations that aren't as willing to go on trips. Perhaps a little trip in a game might be a little bit more their fancy.
Or guys like me who are on the other side of the country, and there wasn't much civil warring
Yes.
over here in Las Vegas,
Mhm.
so not too many historical battlefields out here. So yeah,
Oh
you
yeah.
know that's actually a really good point that you bring up about preserving history, because War of Rights in a way is preserving that history too digitally. Should some tragedy happen or something where one of the battlefields is damaged or something is lost, it's always going to be there in the game, and I think that's really
Don't even
cool.
jinx us, man.
Oh
Come
yeah,
on, stop
knock on
it.
wood, knock on
Yeah,
wood.
quickly while we can.
So your answer is you just love them all, and I'm with you there. I've been to obviously Antietam is one of my favorites, but
Obviously.
Gettysburg, I loved Gettysburg because like you, I played Gettysburg, Sid Meier's Gettysburg when it was new.
Mhm.
Loved that game, absolutely loved
Yeah,
that game. I grew up watching movies like Gettysburg, for instance, and once I'd seen that,
got you.
my dad got me into it when I was a kid, and so I started playing Gettysburg, and I'm like, this is so interesting. And when I finally got to visit the battlefield, it's like if you love, I don't know, whatever, World of Warcraft, let's say, and suddenly you get to go walk around in one of your favorite dungeons. But this is like real life. I love the game, and I got to actually walk around on the real battlefield, and I'm like, I know where this happened. I know where the peach orchard is. I know where the wheat field is. Oh, there's a little round top. I got to stand on. It was, man, it was just surreal. It's really cool how they preserved it.
Well, on a different note, when I was living in Philadelphia, not well, I guess it is a battlefield, albeit not specifically the Civil War. A lot of the forts that are still in existence are amazing to go to, and I highly recommend going to one if you have one in your nearby area or if you happen to be in the area. So things like some of the forts that are up in Michigan are really cool, and they have a lot of folks that are doing living history on the battle sites. And the one that I was at over in Philadelphia is really awesome as well. It's one of the most long-standing forts in existence
Hmm.
since even before the Revolutionary War era. And goodness forbid, but my memory is absolutely terrible. So if you give me a single moment, Fort Mifflin, there it is. I knew it
Okay.
started with an M.
Yeah, I've
uh,
been up to
Terrible
Michigan.
memory
Maybe I
though.
should check that out.
Yeah,
Oh.
Fort Mifflin is an excellent place to go to. I highly recommend that. During the Civil War, was used as a prisoner of war camp, um, and housed a lot, or I should say, more so a political prisoner camp, more
Hmm.
like for the folks in the surrounding area. But yeah, it's those are very great places to go to across the country, really.
Oh, that's awesome. I do actually travel up to Michigan. I'm gonna have to check that out next time I am
Mhm.
up there. So, moving on to more of rights related questions. So, I personally, I've been playing multiplayer games since the '90s, and
Nice.
I've come across very few communities that I would really call tight knit communities, or maybe tight knit's not the right word, but passionate, I think is the correct word here. Um, and War of Rights is one of maybe three in my entire lifetime that I would call an extremely passionate community, passionate about the subject. I
That's
don't know
awesome.
if you agree with me here, but if you do, why do you think that is? Why do you think people are so passionate about this particular game?
Well, perhaps it's Hopefully, a combo of our genius. Obviously, no.
Clearly, that's 100% of it.
Clearly. But the thing I would probably best attribute to it would be, um, thankfully, the amount of people that are reenactors, former reenactors, um, people that are very much into the role playing aspect or the military simulation aspect
Hmm.
of the game, as uh, one might prefer to call it. Um, it's there's various aspects certainly that I would say combine to attribute to that collectiveness and that passion, as you're mentioning, and um, we're always very grateful for it when it
Hmm.
comes to people continuing to be passionate and continuing to support us and helping make this game continue to be great. And uh, especially with all the updates that are, with any luck, coming down the pipeline.
Yes, yes. All the updates are coming tomorrow, so that'll be great.
All of
Um,
them.
all of them. I'll quote you on that. Okay, yeah. So
Shit.
I've noticed that even the people in the community who maybe scream and whine about stuff that I don't think is a big deal, but maybe it's a big deal to them, that's still a form of passion. They still love the game enough that they're upset. And I mean, it sucks that they're
Yep.
upset about whatever they happen to be upset about. But I can appreciate
Mhm.
um, their passion for the game and that they love it so much that they're constantly invested in what's coming next. What's coming next? I can't wait for this. Can't wait for that. I think there was an interview with remind me of his Henry Cavill, I believe, is the guy who plays The Witcher, and he was Superman as well.
Yes.
And they interviewed him, and they were talking about toxic fandom. People who drag it down. And he
I
says,
know.
"I don't."
I know exactly what you're talking about.
The interview I'm talking about. He says, "I don't believe in that. I don't think there is such thing as toxic fandom. I think it's people who are passionate, and passion. You can be passionate mad, you can be passionate happy, but if you're passionate about it, you're gonna stick around." And I see that in the War of Rights community. We have the good and the bad, but all these people love the game, and they're still there. So
Yeah.
I'm with you there. Okay, so this one's a little bit of a more fun question. I wish this was realistic, but if the developers could just snap their finger and any one feature just suddenly appears, you don't have to do any bug testing, it just works. What would that one feature be? No bug testing, just okay, there we go, it's
No
released,
bug
done.
testing. Let's see here. We have a lot of things that we want to have done. Obviously, if anybody has seen our roadmap, there's a few things.
There's a couple left on the map, yeah.
Just a couple, and so there's definitely quite a few that can make and break the game, perhaps. So perhaps one of the candidates for such a Thanos type move might be
The
something
snap,
along the
yes.
lines, yeah, the snap,
I didn't think of
for
Thanos, but you
something
got a good point there.
might be something along the lines of perhaps getting those upper officers with the maps and the headquarters, part of the historical battle mode, just finished just like that, or perhaps the updated melee system that we have planned. Getting that just done with a snap would also be a-okay in our books,
Oh,
probably.
the upper officer bit, man, as a CO, that just I would love to be able. We're in a campaign right now where we connect
Mhm.
another game to War of Rights, a tabletop
I
game,
saw.
and I was thinking, man, it would be so cool if I could just stand on a mountain or sit on the back of a horse with binoculars and send runners to give commands to my guys. That would be amazing. So it's funny you should say that. That's definitely something I would. If you run across Thanos, tell him to snap that in because we would all love to see it.
Mhm. I'll make sure next time I see him. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear he's dead these days. Okay, so
What?
oh, spoiler alert. Was that a spoiler alert? So, so
Anyway, please continue.
I know this question was coming because the whole community is super excited about it. But artillery, we're gonna switch to artillery now. You guys
There's
have
artillery.
you guys have been teasing artillery more and more lately. Trust me, we are super excited about it. Every time a video related to artillery comes out, everyone's like, "Oh, come on, come on, come on, be tomorrow, be tomorrow." And I understand that you guys have to do a lot of work. You want to make sure you don't release a messy, buggy product. You want to make sure it's as good as it can be for when it comes to the community, and we appreciate that. Believe me, we do. But Could you possibly give me at least a ballpark figure for when artillery will release?
I am under lock and key in regards to that. I am
Gah.
so sorry. I'm so sorry. I wish I could say more, but I did want to mention that we it's our number one priority right now. Obviously,
Hmm.
albeit there's a lot of things that are coming into fruition through the creation of artillery, such as we mentioned, the transport system being a really good way to uh, help jumpstart our addition of cavalry into the game at whatever point that might be.
Hmm.
Thanks to
Tomorrow.
the coding that we're already doing for the tomorrow, yes.
Hmm.
Thanks to the coding that we're doing for the artillery already. Uh, and beyond that, we do also want to mention that um, before the full release of artillery, we are going to make sure that beyond our own internal testing, we're also going to open it up for um, public testing of it before full release into the main part of the game that people are playing right now. So there is going to be some early dev testing, some early, let's see the right word, dev and player testing, and then finally after that release to the general public for full artillery, playable artillery. And I can assure you that we are just as excited to have it come to fruition, with the exception of how much uh, all of the things that we've been doing thus far to balance the game are just going to be right out the window
I
as
know.
soon as it's in.
Yeah, I know that was
Great. It's
a big
so great.
concern. A big concern with all the guys is like,
Mhm.
so what if someone just has a really well placed canister shot and everybody dies? The map is won.
Mhm.
So I'm sure it's going to be quite an adventure trying to balance things out. I do you know? I didn't. This is just off the top of my head, and you don't have to answer it if you're not allowed to. But I think you had mentioned to me before in another conversation that you may possibly turn off team damage for artillery for the early part of the release until we figure out a balance. Is that still the case, or is that just talking?
No, that is what was mentioned when we first were talking about the RD release back in the latest field report, or the field report just before. I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But the first iteration of artillery, when it's fully available for everybody, is going to have uh, team damage off until we can also from there implement a proper system
Hmm.
that will properly punish those that are trying to do team damage on
Oh,
purpose.
you know they're going to be there too.
Oh yeah,
On the drill
canister
server, I'm certainly going to be one
is
of
too
them.
much fun not to
Yeah,
overuse.
yeah, there's that scene from Gettysburg. They made it into a GIF or a GIF, whatever you want to call it. And the part where the Pickett's charge is happening, right? And they're coming up on
Mhm.
the Union artillery, and they just blast them point blank in the face. And I'm thinking, those
Yeah.
poor extras, man. It must have been a bad day for those guys. But I could
Oh
just
yeah.
see that happening in War of Rights,
Mhm.
and I
Oh
certainly
yeah.
hope it
It's
does.
there's just in regards to little safety for everybody that might be considering black powder weapons in real life and things like that. Even just blanks will hurt you
Yeah,
very easily.
in the face, I would
If
imagine.
Yes. So don't do it at home, kids. Anyway, let's go ahead and continue.
So there goes my plans to blow myself in the face with a blank out of
I
a
know. I'm
Napoleon.
sorry. I'm nothing but a wet blanket in this conversation. Let me tell you.
You ruined everything for me.
Mm.
So, just one more
Wet blanket
question.
with a great stash, though. It's
Yeah, yeah. Oh, hey, you know what I call this beard, and you've got a pretty similar style. It's called the Riker beard, if you know your Star Trek.
I was immediately gonna say that.
Yeah. In fact,
Next thing, I'm just waiting for that little knee thing to happen in the thick.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Jump. Well, I would jump over this chair, but it's about 5.5 feet high,
Oh,
and my
it's
high
the
jump
wrong.
days are
See,
gone.
that's your problem. You need to get the right chair.
You're right.
It's all about the presence, man.
I know. I really should. I can't command from a chair like this. So,
Get the right command share, you're set for life.
that's right. That's the key to being a good battlefield commander. So,
I mean, really.
one more question on that line. Let me make sure I got this question right. So, what
Yeah.
is your? I know you guys are. There's an ongoing developing process. I think Trusty Jam a couple weeks ago was saying that some of the coders had squashed one bug in the artillery, and then 10 more popped up, which is the fight forever in every game. What would you
Yes.
say is the, if you're allowed to say this, what would you say is the chief bug or difficulty or issue or whatever you want to call it that the development team is on right now while working and to finish artillery?
Unfortunately, with that, I wouldn't be able to say, even if I knew.
Oh,
Being on
dang.
the historical advisor side of things, I'm not the best suited to understand, let alone relay what those issues might be. Um, if we were able to release that in sort of information, or perhaps it's something that might be best asked of Trusty to see if uh, that would be something we should mention.
I'll hit him up and see if I could get some info
Oh,
out of him.
absolutely.
He's
Flood his inbox. He'll love it.
Oh yeah, I know how much he just loves us pinging him all day long about
Oh yeah.
everything. And may I just say, unrelated to that, but may I just say, the bug that we encountered a couple weeks ago, where all the bodies would go flying in the air every time someone shot
Mhm.
them, that
Oh
was
yeah.
a golden moment in War of Rights for me. I know it was a bug, and I'm happy you guys fixed it, but that was the best bug I have ever encountered because we would sneak behind the enemy and we'd be shooting them in the back, and it'd be like boo boo, bodies just flying, and it was like a kill confirmation. Every time you kill the guy,
Oh
he goes
yeah.
100 feet in the air, and I'm like, oh, I got that guy. So I
Well,
missed
we
that
got to get
bug.
it in somehow, guys. Sorry,
Uh,
we're not going to do hit markers except for right in the air.
I wish they had not fixed that bug until artillery came out because I want to see
Oh yeah.
canister fire send 100 guys into the air at once. Would have been I would have quit gaming after that because there's nothing better. That would have been the best.
No,
Um,
that's where somebody comes up behind the cannoneer going, "Son, have you heard about the Avengers Initiative?"
That's great. Okay, so I have some questions here from the community. These are mostly from my guys in the 3rd US, but also some other regiments here. And I'm just going to go down this list and ask them, and you can answer the ones that you know you can answer. And the ones you can't, just give me vague politician esque answers, and we'll be good.
Perfect.
Okay,
Excellent.
so first question is from First Sergeant Everett of the 3rd, and he asks, are there plans to implement, and you already answered this, but I'm going to ask it anyway, are there plans to implement blocking of some kind or counter to melee attacks?
Yeah, with that question, with the, uh, or I should say, one of the things that we're looking to do in future past artillery is included the implementation of a new form of the melee system. And with that, that does include things like blocking and parrying and added sorts of animations in regards to melee, um, or different sorts of attack options as well. So there's all sorts of things that we're looking to do, and we'll see if things actually work out or not in regards to getting that all done. Um, we'll see what happens basically,
Okay.
but there's a lot of things that we're definitely looking forward to trying and rehashing, including the melee.
Excellent. That's great to hear. And I think it's been mentioned before, but now it's on video. Everyone knows they could stop
Mhm.
saying, yeah, are they going to fix melee? Are they going to add to melee? Blah, 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 blah. There, it's on video,
I'm
guys.
screwed now.
Yeah, he said it. He can't go back now.
I can't
So
worm out from under that one.
So up next, Sergeant Major Bigfoot. He's asking, and also from the 3rd, he's asking, with the implementation of artillery, are there plans to add more gore? For instance, dismemberment, arms going flying when someone gets hit by a canister shot, things like that.
Well, for those that might have missed it, there is that awesome part of the Harper's Ferry maps that uh, make you think that you're in World War One.
Mm-hmm.
And in those instances, you might notice quite a bit of gore. So fortunately, we already have implemented into the game those sorts of gore and dismemberment. That is definitely possible with such artillery hits that you might experience in any of the maps that we have currently with that AI artillery. And once playable artillery comes around, I'm sure that as soon as some uh, terrible double canister starts getting breathed out of the dragon-esque barrels of cannon, that there will be a lot more dismemberment to be seen over time.
Okay, sounds kind of grim that I'm excited about
Oh
dismemberment,
yes.
but All right, dismemberment. Let's get rid of those limbs.
Nay!
Yeah, I was watching
Do
an
it again!
interesting.
Do it again!
Yeah. I was watching an interesting documentary today about Colonel Chamberlain and a wound that he took back in 1864, I think it was. He got shot in the groin and lost all of his parts. And they were talking about how in the Civil War, dismemberment, loss of limbs, only accounted for about, I think it was 20% of all injuries that were filed for. And a
Yep.
lot of injuries were hidden. And later on in like the 1880s, 1890s, when these guys started to get older and the next generation grew up, the people started to frown on you if you weren't missing a limb. They're like, "Well, what did you sacrifice for your country? I don't see any missing pieces." So that was
Oh yeah,
really interesting documentary to watch.
mm. Yeah, you gotta really love the Victorian sensibilities, or even, as you were saying, the getting into the Edwardian period of sensibilities when it came to understandings of the travails of soldiers, which even today is still a problem. It
Yes, it
took all the
is.
way up until the 1980s for them to finally start taking PTSD seriously and not just be calling it old sergeant's disease or
Mm-hmm.
what have you, or shell shock by the time of World War One. And hopefully, something that the documentary you were just mentioning covered was the amount of soldiers that, um, because they didn't have a proper understanding, would be basically hidden away in shame by their families because they were suffering from uh, PTSD and exhibiting some of its symptoms, which the Victorian people interpreted as being weak-willed or
Mm-hmm.
um, various other
Yeah, real men
uh,
hide their pain, sort of stuff.
yes, that
Yeah.
that sort of mentality. So when they'd be screaming in the middle of the night, um, they'd oftentimes basically be shunted away into various psychiatric facilities or hidden away in uh, the furthest crevices of their homes in order to basically not deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's sad. And on a lighter note, I think I get
Yes.
PTSD every time I play Harper's Ferry Crossing. And it's basically PTSD Simulator 2020 is what we call it. And I hope you guys never change it. I hate and love it at the same time. So keep it, please. Especially if you're going to
Oh
add
well,
more
now
gore.
everybody's already dead. Guess we're not charging, guys.
Yeah, exactly. Or more the case. All right, here comes the revs. Everyone get on the stone wall. Hey, where'd everyone go? You're all dead. So don't change that. Okay, so my next question comes from Captain U of 3rd U.S. Company B. Oh God, I hope it's Company B. He'll kill me if I'm wrong. He asks, are there future plans for musicians in the game? And if so, do you guys have an idea of how they will benefit the team, or are they just for like reenactment purposes so we can hear them, but they don't like morale boost or whatever the case may be?
Yes, in both cases, in regards to both the RP potential that musicians display, as well as actual functionality in regards to the game settings. So, um, absolutely, musicians are on the docket yet again. If I would definitely recommend everybody who has these sorts of questions to take a peek at our roadmap, which is, I think, the third one down in the list of our news on the news section of our website, let alone what is visible on the Steam. We have it pinned there in the Steam discussions, and musicians is definitely on that list, including how musicians, if I recall correctly, in regards to what we have already released about them, there will be both buglers, fifers, and drummers available. And of each of those, the drummers and fifers will have the ability to do um, not just the calls that go towards benefiting what the officers are doing, but also tunes as well in combination with each other of all the old favorites, of course, and
So they'll be able to
then specific.
sync up the instruments. Is that what you're telling me?
That is the hope.
Oh wow. Well, it's been done, so I know it's possible. Because I don't know
Yes.
if you ever played Star Wars Galaxies back in the day, but that game had something like that. And oh man, if I could see that at a Civil War game, I would die happy. That would be so cool.
Yeah, we're hoping so. Definitely some great RP potential in regards to on the drill camps, let alone on the battlefields,
Yeah.
because um, they'll be able to do so in both cases. If I'm recalling correctly, don't quote me on this one. Um, the drummers and fifers, I'm not positive right now if they're going to be available not just on the drill camp but also the battlefield. I need to double check on that. In regards to buglers, they're certainly going to be available on both sides, and they're going to be the most useful in regards to relaying the orders of the officers. So the especially as we do improvements on the officers and their ability to give out orders, and add to the amount of orders they're able to give, the buglers are going to be able to help make it so that if they give a order to move to a certain location or to form a column, form a line of battle, those sorts of orders, due to the 3D voice or due to the exigencies of the battlefield situation, don't really go very far.
Hmm.
The bugler is able to, if they give the correct order, uh, in combination with what the order was given by the officer, or I should say that they give the correct call to his order, then that his the circumference of the radius. Sorry, don't put me in a math class. The radius of
That's for developers. You don't have to worry about
it
math.
is. I'm not at all in there. The radius at which that order is going to be seen by the other members of his regiment is going to be increased due to the bugler and able to be heard from a much greater distance.
Okay.
So, as if somebody's coming in from spawn, they're going to be able to see some of those orders, and more so importantly, hear where those orders are coming from, etc., and have a better way to pinpoint where the regiment is, as well as perhaps having a better way of seeing the order come into play. So those are the sorts of things that we're hoping musician classes can add to the game, both in regards to RP and game functionality potentials.
Oh man, I think 1,000 buglers just cried out together at once. Yay! So,
Cried out in joy, the heavens opened
yes,
up. Yes, all sorts of great
yes,
things.
they're all breathing heavily in bugler right now. So, they just
Is
keep
that
their.
just a whole bunch of
I knew a
you're
guy,
just hearing God, what is this? The
the
accordion
accordion.
sounds.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I knew a
coming in
guy
on the ballad.
who went out and he bought a heavy weight just to press down on his end key so he could bugle into the mic. And he was
Perfect.
terrible at it. He was such a horrible bugler, and we loved him because it was comically bad. It was great. Anyway, so moving on. Private First Class Wombat asks, are there plans to go beyond 1862, specifically the maps we have now in the campaign we're in now?
Well, in some of the ways that I've answered a question like this before, it is a lot of effort just
Yes.
to get some of these maps done. For instance, if we consider the Battle of Shepherdstown, when we went on our 1860, sorry, I look great for my age, let me tell you. Uh, it's been a few years.
I knew Lincoln. He was a good man.
He was a great man. I shook his hand.
Oh
What's
man.
your name? Uh,
Where am I?
Where am I? Where's my pudding? Sorry, I'm getting too much in character now.
Yeah, you're good
But
at it. You're doing great.
I am. When we went on our uh, trip in 2014, there we
Hmm.
go. Words, numbers, still a problem for me. Um, one of the troubles I can say that I had in regards to the historical advising sort of things is it was such a small town. Nobody really made too many maps,
Yeah.
or really documented too much information in regard to the town. So trying to fester out some of those details to make it as, again, historically accurate as possible can be very troublesome. And thankfully, that's one of the fun things actually I find about the research side of things is really, finding those obscure books. I have a problem finding those obscure books
Some would
that
call
help
it a
to.
good thing. It's a good thing, as Martha Stewart would say.
It's a happy little accident. It's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, yeah. So finding those obscure books that have that one image that you needed, or finding those obscure articles is actually kind of fun. Uh, and sites like the Library of Congress are awesome resources that are, again, free to the public. And again, during our 2014 trip, excuse me, we had also an awesome opportunity to do research in the Virginia State House Library or the NPS libraries. They allowed us into some of those, and just awesome,
Hmm.
awesome work that had already been um, collated and available for those that are interested.
Yeah, and as you said earlier, the more of this information that we gather now and put into
Hmm.
War of Rights, the more it's
Yeah,
preserved because
exactly.
time marches on and people forget or people stop caring about preserving battlefields. But if it's preserved digitally, it's always preserved.
Yeah,
So I think
exactly.
that's pretty neat. I've done a ton of research. My unit is the third U.S., so kind of
Yeah.
there's a ton of information out there about the old guard because it's the first unit ever.
Oh
And
yeah.
I have come. There's all kinds of different places that you can get historical information about different units. Not necessarily just the Library of Congress, but there's a lot of old colleges out there. I know there was one in Michigan I found because I was looking up one of my ancestors who fought in Indiana and for like the 150th Indiana or something like that. And this college happened to have the letters that this guy had written home to his wife, and this is the only place to find these letters. They were nowhere online. I had to do a ton of research, but they're there. And I just thought, there's so
That's
much,
awesome.
yeah, there's so much content out there that just nobody knows because nobody looks. And so the more you
Yeah,
guys research for
it's all
these,
spread out everywhere.
oh yeah, it's everywhere. And the more you guys do the research for all these battlefields, the more it's preserved. So I really appreciate that, and I think the community does too.
Yeah. So perhaps to get back to the original question,
Yes.
um, yeah, it's been a long road around, but we're back again. It's
When you
great.
get us when you get me starting to talk about Civil War, we're gonna go off on tangents every five
Either of
seconds.
us, really.
Yeah.
Again, to answer the original question of your lovely member, the other battlefields and other campaigns of the war are absolutely awesome, but there is a lot of work that goes into doing it right
Hmm.
and doing it to the fidelity that we would prefer to do. Getting all the research done to ensure everything down to rain spouts on the houses is as correct as possible. So, um, just the map of Antietam, for instance, has been years and years in the making, and still being improved, or even still needs to be uh, redone completely, considering the limitations that we had then versus now.
Yeah.
The improvements to CryEngine then versus now uh, has meant that we can get even bigger than just 4 kilometers by 4 kilometers. But um, due to the way the system is like, due to the way the engine is like, it wouldn't be as easy as just copy and pasting. It would be redoing from scratch
Hmm.
practically all the hand drop fences and rocks and trees and things like that. It's a humongous amount of work, and we have one map maker.
Oh, jeez.
So let alone all the other duties that kind of get put on to different folks.
Yeah, I've gone through, especially the Union drill camp, which is very wooded around the shooting range, and I've walked around and thinking, did a guy just decide a tree should go right here, and then 5 feet later a tree should go here too? Like, was there a guy who literally picked each spot for each tree in this forest? Like, the amount of detail is insane, and that's actually what gets a lot of people to stick around when they come to the drill camp for the first time
Yeah.
ever playing the game, and they look around and they're like, holy smokes, this is extremely detailed.
Hmm.
And we explained to
Oh yeah.
them, yeah, they meticulously went over every inch of this map to make it look the way it does. So
Yeah, and the story behind the drill camps is that thankfully there is some paint tools available, uh, and then there is passes that are done afterwards to add those little details in
mhm,
amongst that uh, not as detail friendly paint tools. But the maps for the drill camps are actually the same map, just uh, 4 kilometers by 4 kilometers once again, and the drill camps themselves are in two different sections of it, and section off in a similar way to the way that's the skirmish areas are.
mhm,
Um, and that's basically the drill camps, and also to save space in regards to not just doing two copies of the same thing. It's two different locations with their own intricacies and everything like that, and based off of a real life location as well. So we basically took a section of the Maryland countryside,
And just put it in
plopped it
game.
onto a map, put it in game, historicified it, to mangle a word apparently, and uh, helped make it our own with the addition of the drill camps, clearing out the necessary area to get regimental sized, or as the artillery gets implemented, artillery uh, battalion, or probably just battery sized camps, let alone battalion sized camps,
Yeah.
implemented on there, or whenever cavalry
Hmm.
might start getting in there, doing a whole squadron or even a regiment of cavalry sized uh, camps. They take up a lot of space, let alone
Yes.
all the picket camps that they would set up around them to help protect them. It's a lot of area to cover.
Yeah. Well, if you're taking suggestions, Gettysburg would be mine. And I think
Of course.
there's no other battlefield I'm aware of in the Civil War that's as meticulously mapped out by so many different sources. But that's just my suggestion.
Oh yeah.
I don't have to actually go to work and make the maps. You can teach me though. I'll do it. So on to
Why
the
not Fort Henry and Fort Donelson? Come on, man. Let's
yeah.
branch out here.
Or what was the fort that the volunteers attacked in Glory? I can't remember the name of it.
I Oh
That
God,
was
Fort Wagner.
yeah. We could do Fort Wagner, and it could just be Federal's dying simulator. Is just basically what that would be. We just charge it and die.
Perfect.
Okay, so just got a couple more for you, and then I will let you escape me. So, Private First Class
Not very
Custard.
far.
Yeah, Custard. That's probably the first of our actual historical members here. Everyone else has names like
Uh-huh.
Bigfoot and you, as in you. So here's the actual first historical name. He asks, "Is there a plan to bring some kind?" And I think I know the answer to this one. To bring some kind of supply wagon to resupply. I know you're bringing them in for artillery, obviously,
Yep, the
but
numbers.
resupply wagons or resupply points or something like that for weapons, for rifles, pistols, whatnot.
Right. Yeah, ammunition wagons, basically.
Yes.
Um, those sorts of quartermastery systems, lovely mangling of another word there.
Mm,
I'm at it all night, don't worry.
you're doing great.
Uh, I'll tell you. But that sort of supply system um, definitely has some potential, especially because of the transport system. But at the current moment, I'm afraid I couldn't say either way.
Okay. Well, that's a bummer. One more question from the community. This one comes from Colonel Shadowlorn of the 1st South Carolina. He asks, are there plans to expand on the admin tool, things like extending the timer, disabling the capture point? I know we can do this in the settings on the server, but it's a lot of manual work. So are there plans in the future to add more features to the admin tool for the guys like me who own servers?
Absolutely, which is another point on our roadmap that we have, is to help improve the experiences of our server admins and ensure that they're going to have a better time, an easier time of uh, tweaking the game to their whimsy, so to speak, or at least tweaking the game modes as necessary. And with the introduction of all the new and different variations of things like artillery, cavalry, yet again, a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
balancing is going to be all the way up in the air once again as we implement each thing. The even the musicians might have its own impact, as we were mentioning before. So with all that in mind, absolutely, admin tools are also pretty high on our list in regards to things we'd love to get out there for folks to play around with and have an easier time with.
Yeah, excellent. Now, I know you mentioned the roadmap, of course, which I
Mhm.
have seen before. I don't know. I wrote down a question about the roadmap, and then I realized, what am I talking about? I've seen the roadmap. I don't know why I'm asking for one.
It's there, we promise.
Yeah, it's right there. Just you have got to click around a little bit. But do you? Well, this is kind of a two-parter. Do you guys update that roadmap as you complete items on it? And question number two: what is Campfire Games' primary goal or goals, perhaps, to complete this year by the end of 2020?
That is a really good question, and really, the roadmap is perhaps the best answer I can give in regards to the different things that we're looking to complete, maybe even before the end of 2020, and preferably so. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
there's all sorts of things that we're hoping to accomplish as we get closer and closer to not just being in the early access, but actually getting to and not alpha, I'm sorry, a beta state, and getting into even final release from there. Yet again, whenever those might be. Unfortunately, we uh, don't have any surefire
Mm-hmm.
time frames for any particular item just because we don't know. We are pretty much programming from scratch. We're not having the benefit of working off of a previous iteration or already game with all the coding already done
Mm-hmm.
in regards to how modders are oftentimes working uh, off of the basis of something. We're going completely from scratch here. So, uh, with that in mind, we do have several full-time programmers that are working on this for us. Um, and short of the addition of a few more, or the help of perhaps some of our community members that are very well established already in regards to programming. Um, Yet again, we just can't make any particular promises, unfortunately. But we are tirelessly working on trying to get things out there and get it to you guys as best we can, and yet again to the fidelity that we're trying to go for. Because
Yeah.
unlike EA and all those other AAA games, we're not
Oh
too
God.
much into the bugs always being
Oh, or just pumping out a bunch of content that's half completed. Yeah.
yeah.
Don't get me
That's
started
not
on.
our end game, unfortunately,
It got me
or
started on
fortunately, I
that
should say.
crowd. I've got whole videos on this channel about them, so I'll avoid it though. Um, let's see. I want to make sure I got all my questions. Actually, I have 100 more questions, but since
Perfect.
you eventually have to sleep and eat food, I won't ask them all. I'll keep it pretty simple tonight. But let's hop off of war rights for a minute. I'm just going to ask you
Okay.
two final questions here that are somewhat related but not.
Yep.
Um, because you and I both love the Civil War, I would love to get your
Uh-huh.
take on. Let me make sure I ask this right, otherwise it's going to be totally screwed up. I've got it over here on my other
Uh-oh.
monitor. So, if you were tasked with changing the outcome of Fredericksburg, the Battle of Fredericksburg, or the slaughter of Fredericksburg, to a Union
Yes.
victory, but you could only make one tactical choice change, what would it be?
Oh.
Firing
There's
Burnside
very
is not a
there's
tactical choice, by the way.
yes, I know. There's a lot of things um, that Burnside was trying to do, and short of actually demoting him to something that he was more comfortable with being at most a divisional commander. Um, the Perhaps some of the tactical choices wouldn't have been to charge straight at Mary's Heights.
Probably not a smart
That's a big
idea.
no-no.
Yeah.
Things were going pretty okay all the way up until they got the beachheads on the other side of into Fredericksburg, excuse me, across the Rappahannock.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but some of the decisions that started to be made from there, including a very uh, Pickett's Charge esque decision to just go straight at those heights instead of all the different avenues they could have done, through those rose-colored glasses of hindsight.
Yep.
Uh, there's certainly some better decisions that could have been made in regards to those, not just one charge, repeated charges against the same very well established strong point, with going across open field right up a little bit of some hillside before finally getting to a stone wall
Mm-hmm.
with a whole bunch of guys behind it.
Ready to kill you.
Is ready to kill, for maybe getting low on ammunition by the time of some of those later charges, but that probably would have been one of the big ones. And um, Grant had some, as much as he was considered a butcher, especially around the time of Cold Harbor. Um, One of the biggest things about both Burnside, Hooker, all these different commanders, McClellan, obviously, that was in charge prior to Grant, the biggest thing was just not following up on the victories. And so while Fredericksburg wouldn't have been able to, uh, obviously didn't count towards that side of things, um, the following up and the lack of morale that Burnside was working with as he was going into the Battle of Fredericksburg, let
Hmm.
alone any of the other factors that goes into it. Uh, it's it's a lot of bad situations.
Yeah, they should. They what I was reading was had they gotten there sooner, maybe a day sooner, or had they
Mhm.
pushed the advantage before Stonewall Jackson came and reinforced. I think it was the Confederate right flank. Had they gone ahead before he arrived, the battle might have turned out very differently. But unfortunately, he was too cautious, and it was too late by the time he really decided to go all in. They were well
Yeah, and
entrenched.
you also have to bear in mind that there's a lot of problems with shoulda, woulda, couldas, as we don't know what how the situation would change if you changed one thing. So, if
Hmm.
say they did get there a day before, um, would that have actually changed the outcome as we hope?
Yeah, we just wouldn't know
Well,
unless it
for
happened.
yeah, we don't know. We are working with what did actually happen. So doing the if something happened game can be a bit troublesome that way, but it is fun in
It
regards
is,
to games
yeah.
like Ultimate General to explore what we could do with those sorts of situations.
Yeah, I've played Fredericksburg and Ultimate General, and it's still a nightmare, even knowing what I
Yeah.
shouldn't do. I mean, you can't flank them; they're everywhere. Anyway, that's totally unrelated, but love that game.
And yes, and I'll also just finalize things by saying that the fog of war is a real bitch, no matter what war you're fighting in. And the Civil War was one of the big ones. With Ultimate General, we're working with, having a real time view of everything that's going on in the battlefield, not having to rely on couriers, getting the information to you, getting it to you correctly,
Hmm.
or that it was relayed to them correctly, how the situation's changed since they got that information to you. Um,
Yeah,
that played out.
the informational machine was entirely human in those days. There were no drones or GPS or anything like that.
Yeah, there wasn't real time communication going on thanks to radio. And like I said, even today, the fog of war is still a problem for commanders
Hmm.
to properly work with, let alone what Burnside was working with at Fredericksburg. So
Yeah,
uh, that's just something to bear in mind
yeah.
for
So
folks that are considering the same sort of questions.
yeah, everyone likes to say, "Well, had I been there, I could have done better." Like, no, probably
Oh,
not.
thank you, Armchair General. Yes, let's hear
Yes,
more.
had you been there. So on the same note, this is the last question here. If you could make one change to the Battle of Gettysburg to hand the CSA victory, what would that change be?
It would probably be Stewart, I would say, would be the ultimate thing.
Really?
Um, yes, with Stewart not being available for Lee, as his eyes and ears, um, as much fun as he was having playing
Behind enemy
around,
lines.
yeah, as much fun as he was having traipsing around back there, he wasn't strategically doing anything that really benefited the Confederates during the Gettysburg campaign. Um, and with his not being there and the loss that resulted from it, it certainly did not help the situation. And yet again, being careful with making these sorts of if situations, um, I would imagine that Stuart being there probably would have helped a lot, let alone the potential that cavalry had on in battlefield conditions, not just for reconnaissance, but also for chasing down or threatening positions that they could have been doing on the flanks, or
Hmm.
um, on the Union side of things when they were starting to play around with mounted infantry. Um, See, that's another thing with the if conditions, where by the time of Gettysburg, we were starting to see some actual good work on the Union cavalry side of things,
Hmm.
uh, that eventually led to the death of Stuart. I'm forgetting, was Yellow Tavern? Oh my God, my memory. Was Yellow Tavern 63 or 64?
Well, you should know
I,
you were alive at the time.
I know. Well, my memory's failing me at this point, unfortunately. Hey, it's not like I have a computer in front of me or anything, right?
64, May 11th,
64. Hmm.
1864. Mm.
Yeah, but even by July of 63, in comparison to the travails that the Union cavalry was going with in regards to training, in regards to lack of equipment towards the beginning of the war, the lack of horsemanship abilities, um, into the later parts of the war, they were getting better supplies, better weaponry, better acquainted with horsemanship and the requirements to, actually get some horsemanship training facilities started up for the U.S. cavalry. Um, those sorts of things were really starting to even the playing field on the cavalry side of
Hmm.
things for the Eastern theater.
Yeah, and you got to wonder if Stewart had been in the proper place, if he could have tied down, Gamble and Devon's cavalry in a much
Hmm.
less advantageous position in time for the Confederates to get into way better terrain, because
Yeah,
from the get go they were in a pretty bad position. I mean, they did push all the way to uh, uh, what am I trying to think of, the fish hook there eventually, but initially they had to fight that Union cavalry for half a day, almost a full day before they pushed them out.
all the time that was wasted on that,
Enough time
exactly.
for Reynolds to
Yep.
show up, and then it was all over, 3 days later.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So being able to shift out the cavalry that were defending Gettysburg on that first day would have made great time for them to be able to make their own defenses around Gettysburg instead of them having to be on the offensive.
yeah, which they couldn't really afford to do. The Confederates were usually outnumbered, so they had to be much more. I think Lee's strategy was often uh, go them into a fight, make them come to us, and we
Yes.
choose the ground. Forward
Yeah.
defense, I
When
think, is
they're
the
in the
term.
best conditions. Yeah, that was Lee's entire thing was just
Aggressive
he
defense.
aggressive. Yeah, yes, aggressive defense. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I have a thousand more questions, but as I said, we probably don't have time for those. I mean, I could sit here for until tomorrow morning talking to you about stuff, but
Probably.
in the interest of not making you lose your mind, we're gonna put it to a stop there. I don't want you reminiscing
I don't know.
about.
It's pretty gone so far.
Yeah, I don't want too many flashbacks coming to you from the 1800s here. So we'll put a stop to it right here. But I want to thank you, George, for taking the time to interview with me. There's a lot of people in the community that are going to be very interested in all the things you've talked about today. There's
Excellent.
a lot of people really looking forward to artillery. Artillery, is that what we call it these days? And
Those those
uh,
Sunny boys. Yes.
yeah, and I'm one of them. I'm really looking forward to it. So the whole community's holding its breath and just waiting for that artillery update.
Oh yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm just excited to see it be implemented, to take part in it myself, and better yet, to see everybody's reaction to just how awesome it might become.
Yeah, I wish you had not fixed the flying corpses, because they would have gone hand in hand. But I can't get everything I want. So
Just bring it back for just a microsecond, just a little bit,
yeah,
right after release.
just for like a week after release, enough time to blow people up and send them into a mushroom cloud of bodies. That's all I want to see is a
Have
Confederate
them come
mushroom
back
cloud.
down like rain.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there were some of those battles where I'm running along with my men behind me, and suddenly a body just plops down in front of me. Where did that come from? It was the
Well,
best.
today, Sally, we have a small chance of showers over here on the western field. And then as we get over here, there's a large chance that there's going to be quite a few bodies. Body showers are expected. So keep your umbrellas out. They're not going to be useful.
You're gonna need steel umbrellas for this one.
Yes. Get your steel umbrellas out, people. It's going to be necessary.
Nice, nice. Well, again, thank you for coming to the interview. I really appreciate it, George. And until next time, this is XB, or Brandon, as you can see, because I forgot to change my name on the screen here. And Clark Morningstar, who was wise enough to change his name, although I just said your name, so it doesn't really matter. And I will see you guys on the next one.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.